We're going to take a few minutes to look at some issues regarding queries, especially based upon the work that we're going to see in Chapter 3. Now, we're going to work with for this exercise, the hands-on exercise database as an example. So if you've seen, you'll run across where we've got a query that we're going to create called price per square foot. In this case, formatted. And you can see it's made up about this property information with agents and the properties that are being offered. And you'll see that we've got things like first name, last name, list price, how many square feet, whether it was sold, and then some calculations including, you'll see here, our payment function that we'll see during this chapter. So go ahead and run this for just a second, and you'll see names, list price, etc. Sold, no and yes. In fact, if you click on it, you'll see it's -1 or 0. This means this is going to be a yes/no field or true/false. It's called a bit field. So when we want to go and we want to look at specifically yes or no, you'll notice here it says it as text, yes, yes, no, no. But if we want to go ahead and filter by it, say we're looking at properties that we could buy. So the whole point of our mortgage information here, we want properties that are not sold. So if we want to say not sold, we're going to add a criteria under sold here. We're going to type in, we're going to just say no. Now, if you remember when we talked about delimiters, if it's a string, you are going to put it in quotation marks. However, for a true, false, or yes/no field, you're not going to use those quotation marks. You are just going to type in the word. Now, you need to type in the word that is used by the database. Well, you'll see that when you set up a bit field, you can choose yes, no, true, false, etc. They mean the same thing, but when you're going to do your filtering, you need to keep in mind what the database is using. So if I want to say sold is no, under my criteria, I'm just going to start typing no. Now you'll notice it wants to help me. It wants to add in, oh, you must be typing the word now, a function. We don't want to do that. However, if I just proceed to hit enter or tab, it's just going to be like, oh, okay, you meant to fill it in. So in this case, I need to just click somewhere else to say no. Notice it saves it just as the word no. And when I run this now, all of my results are no. So that's a very easy thing to work with. Now, in the exercises, we're also going to see creating an expression. In this case, price per square foot. List price divided by square feet. List price right here is my list price. It is the field list price. It is enclosed in those brackets. In fact, if we bring up the zoom, no, I'm sorry, that's not what I wanted. I bring up the zoom window, which is not coming up. And you'll see, but we've got this to work with. Now, if I put in my field name incorrectly, say if the list price says, for example, notice that you probably wouldn't even notice it, that you wrote in list prices instead of list price. That's one of the reasons why it's nice to have this here. You can see your field name. So when I go to run it, it now asks me to enter a parameter value, list prices. And if I just say, 1,000, it's going to sit there and divide 1,000 by, the amount of the price per square foot, by the square feet. It's not going to give us a real value here. In fact, if you can find property where it's 73 cents a square foot, I would buy it. So, we've got that. And that's an example of what's called a parameter query. When you put something into those brackets in a query, and it's not a field name, then it says, okay, I want you to ask you a question. I want to have you fill something in. We're going to see that in a later chapter, but I'm just going to show you an example. Under last name, you see that I've got all of these agents here. Now, say I want to find out, I just want to see all of the properties that are being listed under unsold being listed by Robert Allen Dickey. Well, what I can do is I can just say, I can put in a criteria and say, and run it, and there I've got it. However, I may want to say, create a query where I want to see the various agents, and I can just say, okay, put the name in at runtime. That's called a parameter query. It's going to ask you for input. And so you'll see, just to show you this, under my criteria, I'm going to prompt the user for instructions. Enter agent last name under the last name area. And now when I run this, it's going to say enter the agent last name. At which point I can say, and it's going to see that. But if I go back and run it again, I can add a different name. This is actually something that's very useful, especially when you tie it with a report. Your users can go ahead and create an easy on-the-fly report of a specific parameter without having to go in and create new queries for each one of them. Now, one thing, let's just look a little bit at totals for a second. The totals row here, this is where you turn it on, and it'll add a new line here, which we'll get to in a moment. But, one of the ideas is that it's going to aggregate my data. So, for example, I don't necessarily want to have all this information here. First name, last name. I don't care about the agent name. It's not what I'm going to look at totals. Now, if I wanted to look at it, break it up by last name of the agent, that would be fine. So, but what we want to do is we want to get rid of first name. So all I'm going to do is grab this and I'm going to delete that name. And I'm going to add in something called listing right here. And I'm just going to drag it down between the two of them and drop it in. The reason why is I'll show you in a moment. So I'm going to add in a total. And we're going to group, when you go to do a total, I'm going to automatically try to group everything by something. Now, and that's the reason why you want to get rid of extraneous data here. So I want to group by the last name. Listings, I don't want to group them by because each one is an individual item. It is a primary key. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to be count. That's going to tell me how many listings are associated with each of the last names. List price, again, group by is going to screw it up because unless I have two properties with the exact same price, each one is going to be individual. So what I want to do is I'm going to want to get an average of the list price. Square feet, I don't need square feet. So I can say, give me the average of it there. Sold, I can't group by. I'm going to say where. And the other ones here, I'm actually going to just delete these for the moment because I'm not going to need them. They're just going to muddy the water. Now when I run this, what I'm going to see is I'm going to see a formatting issue. So, but you'll just see I've got each last name of each agent. How many of the listings do they have? The average list price and the average number of square feet. We're just going to go back here for a moment and bring up the, make this a general number which goes to, 1 decimal place. And that was for, square feet. For list price, we're going to see, it was currency. So we're just going to say currency. Now when we run this, we have something a little more visible, though for some reason this is still coming out way too long. I'll have to figure that out. But you'll be able to see, okay, at a quick glance that Eisler has got a large number of items, but he also has a, he or she has a decent kind of in the middle of the road average list price. No one is really selling a lot of things with a list price a lot higher or lower. It's one of the values of being able to work with that kind of total row is that we can start pulling this information together and look at it as a group. If we wanted to find out just of all the properties in the database that are listed, what are the list prices square feet, we can actually just even get rid of last name, run it again, and I can see that out of there 213 unsold properties, the average list price is $278,000 and has an average of 2,700 square feet. So it gives us a way that we can quickly go through the data, pull it together. Now something like this we could do pretty much in, as we've seen, filters, working with some of those filter by selection, come up with that information. We could also get this easily in a spreadsheet. If we sat there in an Excel spreadsheet, sorted it, removed all the unsold properties or the sold properties, whichever one, and then just built the functions count, average, and average. However, you're not going to be able to go and do it with breaking it down easily by person. This is one of the advantages that Access has as a database.